The Leo season is beginning. Yes, the sun is moving out of Cancer and into Leo. And Leo is the sign where the sun is strongest. My name is Archie Dunlop. This is Talking Astrology with Archie, and it is Wednesday, July the 22nd, 2026. In this video, I will be looking at the overall astrological situation, and I will be spending some time considering what it means for the sun to be in Leo. And I will be thinking about how the sun in Leo might be impacting the 12 signs. And having gone through the 12 signs, I will finish this video with an I Ching reading. So let's start by looking at the overall astrological picture. So here is the chart for today, set for noon, New York time, on Wednesday, July the 22nd. And we can see that the moon is in Scorpio. So at noon New York time, the moon is at 13 degrees 27 Scorpio. So what this means is that the moon is starting to move out of the Via Combustor. So the first half of Scorpio is in the Via Combustor, like the last half of Libra. And the first half of Scorpio generally is the most problematic part. This is when the moon is going to be fallen throughout its time through Scorpio, but in the first half of Scorpio it's not just fallen, but it's also in the Via Combustor. Via Combustor can be a time when things can be all over the place, when things might not work to plan, when there might be disruption. Kind of a bit like Mercury retrograde, and we've already got Mercury retrograde. So having Mercury retrograde and the moon in the Via Combustor, that could be troubling. But when the moon moves into that last half of Scorpio, to an extent, things do settle down, and the moon does make some quite pleasant aspects. Just before moving out of a Via Combustor, the moon in Scorpio makes a sextile to Venus, and then it moves on and makes a trine to Mercury. So when you think about Venus and Mercury, these are two planets which together they can be connected with art and creativity, and also how we perhaps explain our creativity. So if we want to tell people about what we're doing and get a sympathetic reception, then maybe we can. But it's additionally it's just about conversation, communication, not necessarily dramatic conversation. Moon in Scorpio, Venus in Virgo, Mercury in Cancer. These are negative signs. When I say negative, I don't mean negative in a bad way. It's just that the negative signs are the earth signs and the water signs. The positive signs are the fire signs and the air signs. So it's somewhat understated, and it's enough to just be in touch with people. It doesn't really matter exactly what we're talking about. We shouldn't feel that there's any great need to be exciting and dramatic. And of course we have got the sun about to move into Leo, or does move into Leo today, depending on time zones, but that's certainly something I'm about to talk about. And we also additionally have Mars making a quintile to Neptune. So there's Mars at 16 Gemini, 17 Gemini, making a 72-degree aspect to Neptune in Aries. So Mars quintile Neptune, this is a quintile. A quintile is an aspect which relates to the number 5, because 72 is a fifth of a circle. And so when you've got a quintile, it's very often what we are trying to create. So we have an idea in our heads, and we're trying to deliberately use this idea and project it onto the world around us. And so with Mars is about how we assert ourselves. Mars in Gemini. Now, Mars in Gemini, that's kind of interesting, because Mars in Gemini, likes a bit of variety, doesn't want to be stuck doing one thing. And Neptune, on the other hand, is about make-believe. It can be about disguises, perhaps trying to be someone else. And so you put Mars quintile Neptune together, Mars in Gemini, quintile Neptune in Aries, that might be that some of us feel that we want to change our impression, change our style, for whatever reason. It could be that we want to keep some things secret, and so we want to perhaps be ever so slightly misleading and manipulative by not showing our real selves, but by showing something else, by giving an impression of ourselves which is not necessarily correct. And so it might be a time for disguises, for dressing up, for just changing the way we look and changing what we say, and perhaps being more aware of what we say. We might be looking at every word and saying, well, what impression are we trying to give? And what we don't want is anyone to really know who we are. We certainly don't want to give the game away. And we have our reasons, because perhaps we're trying to achieve something, and secrecy might be very important. That is a way of looking at Mars quintile Neptune. An alternative approach is to say that Neptune is a planet that is quite spiritual. We might have ideas about our spirituality, and we might perhaps feel that our life is not spiritual enough, at least in the short term, and so we might go out of our way to bring spirituality into our life. So we might make a conscious decision to sit down, kneel down, cross our legs, meditate, prayer, whatever needs to be done, and perhaps in our own sort of contrived way, we might feel that we might be able to get in touch with something beyond ourselves. Now, I say contrived. Now, I don't actually mean that in a derogatory sense, because normally when you think about spirituality, you think about something very natural and spontaneous. But with this quintile, there is something contrived, something we're creating ourselves with our conscious mind. But just because we're creating it with our conscious mind, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing, and it doesn't necessarily mean that we won't get real effects. Additionally, we have a semi-sextile between Mercury and Mars. So Mercury and Mars are exactly 30 degrees apart. Mars in Gemini, quintile, Mercury in Cancer. And that could be about saying the wrong thing. Mars in Gemini might be rather impatient, perhaps verbally impatient, and Mercury in Cancer is more retiring and wants to keep some things to itself. And the question is then, how much do we say? So there's a similarity here between the message of Mars quintile Neptune and the Mars semi-sextile Mercury. So you could say that Neptune, Mars, and Mercury are forming a high level sort of link. I'm not going to look at any harmonic chart to see at what level Mercury, Mars, and Neptune are conjunct, but it's probably quite a high level harmonic. I'm not feeling very mathematical today, but there's perhaps a danger if we're trying to create an impression, maybe a false impression, that we just say the wrong thing. A word slips out and we spoil it. So that underlines the fact that if we're into disguises and smoke screens, we have to really be very careful what we say. And then there is the sun moving into Leo, and that is something I'm going to just discuss, in a moment. But let's first of all just look at the positions of the planets from the viewpoint of Sydney, Australia, as a representative of Australia, New Zealand, and East Asia. So this is set for Sydney at noon, and the moon is at 6 degrees Scorpio. So I'm afraid if you are in Australia or New Zealand or the Philippines, or for example, or Kamchatka, then for most of the day the moon will be in the Via Combustor, and the moon will be, square Jupiter, square Pluto. So I think that if you are in Australasia, it's probably going to be a more intense day than if you're, for example, in California. You're going to want to really push things forward, and you're going to have things you want to do, and at the same time, the world around you may not feel itself to be entirely stable because the moon is in the Via Combustor. But on the plus side, I think you can get a lot done, and if you want to demonstrate your power, I think you can. And then there is the heliocentric view, putting the sun at the center of the solar system. You can see that the Earth is getting ready to move into Aquarius, because the Earth heliocentrically is a mirror image of the Sun geocentrically. So the Sun is about to move into Leo, the Earth is about to move into Aquarius, and so we just see something quite similar to what we saw in the geocentric chart. But geocentrically, we saw the Sun starting to move to an opposition of Pluto. Heliocentrically, we can see it is the Earth about to move towards a conjunction, not an opposition of Pluto, but a conjunction with Pluto. So there is the Sun in the middle. So from the Sun's perspective, we can see Earth. Well, if we've got a telescope and we happen to be in the middle of the Sun, we can see Earth about to move towards the conjunction of Pluto, and of course, the Earth moving towards the conjunction of Pluto, and of course the Earth will also be making an opposition to Jupiter. So that heliocentric Jupiter-Pluto opposition is about to be picked up by the Earth, and I think it likely that that could be quite a major event. Additionally, we've got a heliocentric opposition between Venus and Uranus, and that may say something about how people behave, and perhaps if we have expectations of other people's behavior, well, we might be surprised. And then we have the fact that the Sun is moving into Leo. So here is the chart for the precise moment that the Sun moves into Leo. I've set it for Washington, D.C., Eastern Standard Time, and there is the Sun at 0 degrees Leo. So looking at Sun in Leo in general, of all the 12 signs, the Sun is strongest in Leo. And that's not a matter of opinion. That is just straight mathematics if you have a point system. So there are point systems in astrology. And William Lilly, for example, in his Christian Astrology, published in the 17th century, he goes through all these point systems, and all things being equal, the reason the Sun is strongest in Leo is because the Sun gets 5 points for being in Leo. In the sign of its rulership, it gets 4 points for being Aries, the sign of its exaltation. I think it gets 3 points for being in other fire signs. So that, in a way, is quite good, particularly if we want to establish, our identity. I mean, that's what the sun is about. It's a male planet. It's a fiery male planet. It wants to be at the center of attention. Maybe this is a time of year when, all things being equal, when egos are flying around, and everyone wants attention, and that sounds a bit vague. Oh, by the way, of course, the sun is moving into a fire sign, and so the sun rules the fiery triplicity by day. So that makes sense. So in the hours of daylight, the sun is especially strong, and the sun is so when it's above the horizon, when it's in a fire sign, indeed, any positive masculine sign, that does make the sun strong. Now, as far as this particular iteration is concerned, because things have changed, and we have to look at what planets are where. So when the sun moves into Leo, it immediately starts making an opposition to Pluto and a conjunction to Jupiter. And there is this question about that Sun-Jupiter conjunction. Is it a good thing? Because you could say that Jupiter is now combust. And combustion is when a planet is within 8 degrees of the sun. So the Jupiter principle may be pressurized here. Jupiter is about having a sort of a free flow, having all sorts of ideas about what we'd like to do. It's about vision, and so with the sun conjunct Jupiter, there may be something getting in the way of our vision. Maybe we have to deal with something which is a distractor. It could also be our own morality, because Jupiter is a moral sign. Planet. Jupiter's a moral planet, and so it could be that when Jupiter is combust, Jupiter could actually become pretty moralistic, and especially as the sun is also making an opposition to Pluto. I mean, so this Jupiter-Pluto opposition, which I talked about so much, really is about to become really quite strong. When the sun moves to 4 or 5 degrees Leo in less than a week, then it is powerful, it's intense, and perhaps it really wants to get its way, and perhaps it also wants to get its way in a moral sense. And when we're thinking about decanates, the sign Leo can obviously be divided into 3 decanates, and those 3 decanates are ruled by different planets. And the first decanate of Leo is ruled by Saturn, and the second decanate is ruled by Jupiter. The third decanate is going to be ruled by Mars. So the sun moving into a Saturn decanate kind of gives us another side to the sun in Leo. It's not quite as sunny as it seems, those first 10 degrees. It has a serious side to it. I mean, okay, in terms of Egyptian terms, it's in the terms of Jupiter. So there's a sort of a balance there, but there is a Saturn feel to this first part of Leo. And this chart, what you're seeing is the positions of the planets for the precise moment when the sun moves into Leo. Now, I don't know how important that precise chart is. I mean, it's not like the sun moving into a cardinal sign. This is just Leo. This is just a sign change. But it's kind of interesting that when the sun is in Leo, Moon is at 15 degrees 4 minutes Scorpio, just gone out of a via combusta. And also it forms a sort of a 15-degree series of aspects. So on the 12th harmonic, there is an exact Sun opposition Moon. Let me just show you what I mean. So if we look at the 12th harmonic, for that moment when the Sun the Sun moves into Leo, there you can see the Moon is at 0 degrees Libra and the Sun is at 0 degrees Aries. This is because I'm just multiplying all the planets by 12, the absolute longitudes by 12, and then subtracting 360 until I get back to the sign. So I kind of think that is important. This opposition on the 12th harmonic, so the Sun and the Moon principle. So as the Sun moves into Leo, there is a feeling of discord, a feeling that something is not quite right, that something is in a way, that something needs to be resolved, and it's not entirely easy. And so when you think about the Sun and the Moon, you think of the cosmic marriage. Ideally the Sun and the Moon are going to have a good relationship, but the Sun in Leo, Sun at 0 degrees Leo, Moon at 15 degrees Scorpio, there's a fundamental incompatibility with the Sun and the Moon. And of course you've got the Sun very strong in its own sign. The Moon is fallen in Scorpio, and it just could be that the Sun is maybe too strong for its own good, and certain people may be very sort of headstrong with the Sun in Leo, so headstrong that they discount things which are more subtle, perhaps the emotional side of things. So although it's good that the Sun is moving into Leo in one sense because it's so strong, perhaps the Sun in Leo is maybe it's just too strong for its own good, and it could be disruptive. We need to be look at what's going on in the world. We've got this war in Iran or war in the Middle East, and you've got two countries that do not want to compromise. I'm not going to take sides here. At least, I have my view on what's going on, but it seems that the United States is in a very difficult position, and we should not forget, perhaps, that Donald Trump has Leo rising and Mars in Leo as well. So that could certainly be a problem if you're interested. At that moment that Sun moves into Leo, Mars is making an opposition to true Black Moon Lilith. I do think there's some cause for concern with the Sun moving into Leo. And, that Sun conjunct Jupiter, as I've said, I'm not entirely happy about that. Maybe things will get easier once the Sun has moved past the conjunction with Jupiter, and perhaps Jupiter will find it easier to operate in a natural way. I'll be looking at the Sun-Jupiter conjunction again in a few days' time. And I wanted to finish by looking at just a few people and events who have their Sun in Leo. In fact, not just Sun in Leo, people and events that have their Sun in the first 10 degrees of Leo, in the first decanate of Leo, and in that Saturn-ruled decanate. So starting off with a few people, there is Jesse Livermore. Jesse Livermore was generally seen as being probably the most successful private investor in history. Maybe he made and lost fortune after fortune. He committed suicide in 1940, but when the Wall Street crash happened, I think that he he made the equivalent of something like $1 billion. I mean, he was very rich, but then he lost it all, and that, I think, had something to do with why he committed suicide. But that might say something about how the sun in Leo works. So the sun in Leo, when we think about the sun in Leo, what it means for the sun in Leo to be there, it's a very intuitive placement. And so someone who is a market trader is probably going to be intuitive. He's going to make connections. But the problem with the sun in Leo is that the sun in Leo, being in a fixed sign, it can be something of a bulldozer. It just keeps going. So he keeps chasing an investment. This is why he went bankrupt so many times. He'd have a lucky run, or not a lucky run perhaps, but he worked it out. But he just always went too far. That's why he just had this constant cycle of making a load of money, going bankrupt, or losing everything, making more money, and then just the cycle kept continuing. But there is something speculative about the sun in Leo, and maybe the fact that he was an early Leo person, first decanates of Leo, Saturn ruled. That may have said something about his experience, that perhaps he had the discipline, but in the end, perhaps that sun did him in. I mean, it just encouraged him to take things too far. And his sun in Leo is square Chiron in Taurus. I mean, that's kind of fitting, isn't it? Chiron in Taurus is about money, and so that's sun square Chiron. He had the wound with money. Perhaps it was that wound that encouraged him to keep going, to keep making and losing money. And looking at someone else with the sun in early Leo is J.K. Rowling. We perhaps get this idea that sun in Leo with the right person, early Leo. So her sun in a decanate ruled by Saturn, you could say that Saturn gives her the discipline to just keep working, to be able to sort of keep pushing out her books. Interesting thing about J.K. Rowling is that her sun is sort of unaspected. I'm not really too much into unaspected planets, but it's something one needs to be aware of. It is a view. Okay, her sun is making a sextile to the North Node, but in terms of other planets, it's not really making any aspects. And when you've got an unaspected planet like that, maybe it's allowed to sort of run freely. Maybe the sun in Leo kind of represents the intuitions she had and the ideas she had in terms of writing Harry Potter books. But so it is about success. It's about belief in herself, and certainly she has very strong opinions. And you could say that Sun in Leo is about that, and she, with her opinions. It is in the decanate of Saturn, and that can be what Saturn is about. Now, Sun in Leo can have a sort of a dictatorial streak, for better or for worse. And the president of El Salvador, Nayib Bukele, has his sun at 1 degree Leo, and he's conjunct the North Node, and he has certainly been fantastically successful. You notice that. I mean, J.K. Rowling in her area, literature, was incredibly successful, fantastically successful. And likewise with Livermore, in terms of being a private investor, on his best form, he was fantastically successful. Nayib Bukele, president of El Salvador, at a very young age, and he was able to turn the country round. El Salvador has the second lowest crime rate in the Americas. I mean, there was a cost to pay. I mean, he had to imprison 2% of the country's population, but maybe that was the right thing for him to do. I'm not going to judge him. I don't live in El Salvador, and his sun conjunct the North Node. Maybe he was doing what was right for him. Now, the sun might also represent another person, particularly in a female chart. and that might not necessarily be a good thing. So Joe Biden's first wife, Nelia Hunter Biden, she had her sun in Leo, conjunct Pluto. Now, remember what happened to her at the end of 1972, December 1972. I think she was out Christmas shopping and she had that accident. She was killed, her daughter was killed, and her children, Beau and Hunter, were seriously injured. And does the accident say something about Sun Pluto? Just because you've got Sun Pluto doesn't mean you're going to have an accident. But the Sun may be projectable. I mean, it's a male planet, and so Sun conjunct Pluto may say something about her husband and the fact that she had a powerful husband. I mean, okay, he just got into the Senate when he'd just been elected to the Senate when she was killed, and she was born at the time of the full moon. And then, what kind of events do you get when the sun is in Leo? I mean, these are just sort of random events. I'm not saying they are going to necessarily tell us much. But the sun was in Leo at the time of two battles between Slavs and Germans. One battle, the Slavs won, the Battle of Grunwald. The Battle of Grunwald was in 1410. And I mean, I may have changed the dates from from Julian to Gregorian, but I think this is the date of the Battle of Grunwald. And this was between between the Teutonic Knights and this sort of Lithuanian, Polish, Slav coalition, and so it was a victory of the Slav armies against the Germanic armies, and it was a major event in history, a major humiliation for Germany, and this took place just as the sun moved into Leo. So there is something quite sort of martial, perhaps, about the sun in Leo. But if you've got the sun in Leo, you have to be careful about being sort of too fixed, too rigid. You might really want to do something and it might not work out. And I think perhaps an example of a poor use of the sun in Leo is the Warsaw Uprising. So the Warsaw Uprising started on August the 1st, 1944. And so, if you've ever been to Warsaw, you'll know that it's a really big deal, particularly if you've been there on August the 1st. And it's just sort of major event in sort of Polish history. But it was unfortunately completely ill-advised. It didn't get any support from the Soviets. It was quite clear that support was not going to be forthcoming, even though the Soviets was just right outside the city. And the war was clearly coming to an end, but the Polish Home Army felt they had to do something. Perhaps they probably did it politically to show they were an independent force, that they were independent, that they were thinking forward to Polish independence. They had to make a stand. But the sun was in Leo, the sun conjunct Pluto. This is what we're going to do. There's a fixed timeline, August the 1st, 5 p.m. This is what we're going to do. And it went on for 6 weeks. Certainly caused the Germans a lot of damage, but it led to the destruction of Warsaw, and from a military perspective didn't really achieve anything. And you could say, as it led to the destruction of part of the Home Army, it made the Soviets' job easier when they took over Poland after the war, during and after the war. So that could be an example of just stubbornness, and that perhaps is a danger with sun in Leo. Perhaps particularly that sun in the first decanate of Leo. We feel we've got something we need to do. We're going to follow the program. It's all about pride, but perhaps you've also got to think about practicality. And another event that took place with Sun, when with Sun in the first decade of Leo, which I don't know quite what the relevance of this all is, but the disappearance of Jimmy Hoffa. Jimmy Hoffa was a sort of a union leader who was involved in all sorts of stuff, and he disappeared in 1975. He was almost certainly murdered, and there's the question, where was he buried, and so on, and the mystery of Hoffa, and maybe the fact that the Sun is conjunct Mercury. Something is being concealed. Okay, Mercury wasn't retrograde, but the facts of the matter are maybe not very clear here. And finally, a chart I did look at a couple of days ago, and that was the shooting at the University of Texas in Austin on August the 1st, 1966. And at this shooting, I think 17 people were killed, plus the perpetrator. And so the perpetrator, Charles Whitman, he went up a tower which was 28 stories high, and he started shooting people. And you could say that this was the first school shooting, university shooting, and I think that it was widely copied. And the Sun was in Leo, and the Sun was in the first decanate of Leo, and it was on the day of a full moon. And with Sun in Leo, he clearly had a plan. He had a suicide note. He killed his mother and his wife, and then he went out shooting students. He stab a janitor as well. And so that is an aspect of Leo. Leo is a fixed sign, and once you've decided to do something, you just go and do it. So there is certainly a downside to Sun in Leo. Maybe this downside is particularly strong when the Sun is in the first decanate of the sign, that decanate that is ruled by Saturn. And now I want to turn to the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Wednesday, July the 22nd, 2026. Aries, we have a big change taking place with the Sun in very late Cancer, getting ready to move into Leo. Indeed, today, in many places, the Sun does move into Leo. Perhaps in most places, I make it that it moves into Leo at 8:13 this evening. So, with the Sun moving into Leo, for you, Aries, I think this is good news. The Sun does have a special relationship with your sign. After all, the Sun is exalted in Aries, and so I know that the Sun is not actual ruler of Aries, that's Mars, but the Sun still is almost a sort of a co-ruler. Okay, maybe co-ruler is overstating the case, but I would have said the Sun definitely has an association with your sign. So, when the Sun moves out of Cancer and into Aries, that means that you're feeling better. I think you're feeling sort of more integrated and more prepared. When the Sun was moving through Cancer, it might have been a time when Arians were not necessarily completely feeling themselves. You felt that you had to take stock of your own resources, and it might be a time of year when you maybe need to rest up more than usual, in a perfect world. But with the Sun moving into Leo and starting to make a conjunction to Jupiter, then I think that really does make you feel better about yourself, and I think that you're going to be able to be, I think, more authentic. I mean, you're already very authentic. I mean, Arians, don't like to pretend, don't like to really wear masks. You are who you are, and you can really, demonstrate, what you've got to offer, and at the same time, you're going to have, a lot of power. Not just because the sun is moving into Leo, it's just where you are right now. I think that you have gathered your power together. And it wasn't so long ago that Jupiter was in Cancer, that whole period of lasting over a year when you perhaps were able to think about who you are and what you want, and making sure that you are sort of properly grounded. But I think that in most cases all of that is sorted out. So it is a time of change, but that doesn't mean that you have to be like a super extrovert the moment the sun moves into Leo. I think that it's more subtle than that, and there are perhaps other things to consider. For example, there is a quintile between Mars and Neptune today. So Mars is in Gemini, and it's approximately 72 degrees from Neptune. Of course, 72 degrees is 1/5 of the circle. And so, quintile is about the number 5. And it's what you are trying to create through your own will. And, when you think about Neptune, remember, it is in your sign. And I think that many Arians have been sort of grappling with, what does it mean to have Neptune in your sign? It's been in your sign, all year long. Now it's retrograde, and you might be just wondering, what is it all about? And one way of looking at Neptune is to say that it is about your capacity for transcendence. And so some Arians may feel that they almost need to do something, quite deliberately to move beyond the sort of material world. I mean, at least to project part of themselves beyond the material world, to perhaps deliberately try to sort of get spiritual. Perhaps you're going to take a decision, going to meditate, going to go somewhere that is otherworldly, or it just could be making the decision to, I don't know, go to a patch of water. I mean, Neptune, you associate that with water, so you make the decision, to go to the beach or sit by a lake or a river and just tune into it and make a special effort to tune into it. So, however you want to transcend, the option is available, but you do have to make a bit of an effort. And I know that one doesn't normally associate effort and transcendence. Transcendence should just be something quite natural, but this is a quintile, and it's what you're trying to create. And it may not just be about spirituality, it might be about the whole impression you are trying to give. And some Arians may feel that they need to come over as being a little vague. You don't want to necessarily indicate who you are, what kind of person you are. Yes, there are things perhaps that you want to keep hidden, and maybe you want to keep your true intentions secret for whatever reason. You don't want people to come to conclusions about you, and so it could be a time when you sort of deliberately perhaps wear things or say things which are misleading. You're almost trying to put up a smokescreen with this Mars quintile Neptune, but it's a very deliberate smokescreen. You seem to know very much what you're doing, but it doesn't take away from who you are fundamentally. Under that smokescreen, there is still an Aries who very much knows what they're doing, and they kind of know what they want, and so that could be quite interesting. And I think this quintile is a by and large a fortunate aspect. Now, continuing on this theme of things which are otherworldly, the moon is still in Scorpio, and the moon in Scorpio, it's making a trine to Mercury, trine to Venus, and that perhaps it does say that if you want to be, you can be quite sensitive. You can make an effort to, understand people, make an effort to listen, particularly while the sun is in Cancer. The sun is, at least for the first part of the day, is going to be in this sign. And so you don't have to go into overdrive, sun in Leo, overdrive immediately. There is still a time for reflection and a time to make the effort to, understand people, work out, what they want, perhaps, show some consideration and sympathy. So if you want to do that, I think you can, and you can be... you can be quite effective about it, and it might actually be a time where you can actually win people's support, but provided you're calm about it. I don't think that fundamentally this is a day for doing anything that is too extreme, that emphasizes you too much, because the moon is still in Scorpio, and I think you need to have respect for that. Now, the moon will move into Sagittarius in a day or two's time, and it may be that when the moon moves into Sagittarius, when it makes a trine to the sun, that's when you really start to move into top gear. Taurus. Sun moving into Leo. Of course, the sun always moves into Leo around this time of year, give or take a day. And so with the sun moving into Leo, there might be a change of emphasis. When one thinks of the sun in Leo, from a Taurean perspective at least, it is about tuning into your fixity. Taurus is a fixed sign. Leo is a fixed sign. And asking yourself, well, what is important? What really matters to you? And it's not necessarily a time, all things being equal, where you want to really assert yourself, where and if you're getting too much attention, it just might not feel entirely comfortable, and maybe there are things that you just need to do in your own way. And this time round, the sun, when it moves into Leo, does start making a conjunction to Jupiter. And Jupiter has been in Leo for some time, so maybe you're starting to get a feel for Jupiter in Leo. And I'm hopeful, Taurus, that you are able to some extent, to be able to sort of just calm down and work out what is important. And it might be about things like where you live. Are you living somewhere where you feel comfortable? And are you feeling grounded? Are you doing something that really is a reflection of who you are? And with the sun moving into Leo, it kind of emphasizes Jupiter in Leo. I mean, okay, the Sun Jupiter conjunction has its own issues, but that Sun Jupiter conjunction is not exact, immediately. So let's not worry about that too much in this video when we're talking about today, Wednesday. So do think about what matters, and don't feel that there's anything that you necessarily have to do, though don't forget that Jupiter is still opposition Pluto. In fact, the Sun, when it moves into Leo, it's also starting to make an opposition to Pluto. So that might be somewhat challenging, because you're having to deal with Pluto in Aquarius, and what that means to you. And it takes time. I mean, Taurus is a fixed sign. You sometimes really hold on to things, and you don't want to make too many changes too quickly. And that Pluto in Aquarius represents something of an alternative way of being. It's about you really demonstrating your power in the real world. And maybe the question you're asking yourself is, are you ready? Yeah, you're sure, you're aware of a challenge. It challenges. You kind of know that there are things you need to do. And, a lot of Taurians are interested in power, regardless of where Pluto is. Taurus, can be a sign that, is really into material power. That's one aspect of it. And Pluto is maybe reminding you of that. But with the Sun and Jupiter in Leo, you have to think about yourself first. You have to be properly grounded, and you have to feel secure in yourself before you move to the next stage, before you start to upset things, before you start creating waves. You need to be you need to be completely centered. You need to be at the center of the wheel. And so this is certainly a way in which the Sun in Leo could be working. And given the fact that Jupiter is in Leo, it might be the case that while the Sun is moving through Leo, that things like property, real estate, land are of more importance than usual. And that would certainly matter if your business is connected with real estate in any way, or in terms of your living arrangements, whatever they are. Maybe whether you're renting somewhere, whether you own it, it doesn't matter. It's still important. And with the Sun in Leo, I think that you should have high standards. You should be somewhere that is a reflection of you. It's not a time for second best. After all, it's your life, it's your comfort. You want to be somewhere where you can relax and be yourself. And for some Taurians, that may be straightforward. For other Taurians, that might be something that has to be worked on. But I think that while the Sun is moving through Leo, I think that does help in terms of sorting out your living arrangements and perhaps your domestic arrangements as well. How you relate to your family and things like that. So there are definitely ways in which you can use the Sun in Leo. And as I said, sure, the Sun is in Leo every single year, so in one sense it's no big deal. But I think the fact that Jupiter is in Leo as well gives the Sun moving through Leo sort of extra power, extra poignancy. Gemini. The big event of today is, of course, the Sun moving through Leo, or rather moving into Leo. Okay, maybe it doesn't move into Leo until tomorrow, Thursday, if you're in Asia or parts of Asia, Australia, New Zealand. But we're, at the very least, the Sun is on the cusp, and so this does represent something of a change for you. So you've had the Sun in Cancer, and for a Gemini, Sun in Cancer, it's probably not the best place for the Sun to be. The Sun in Cancer just maybe just a little too focused on things that might be boring, and having to worry about money, or at least think about money and material stuff, and what you have, do you have enough? And it might just be getting a bit boring. And now that the Sun is moving into Leo, you can change. You can change your focus. And the Sun, of course, rules Leo. and we've also already got Jupiter in Leo, and this is perhaps a time to be thinking about how you communicate, how you get your message across. So that's kind of very relevant for me. For example, I've got my sun in Gemini, and I put out these videos every day, and I need to think about how I'm putting out these videos. Are these videos good enough? Is my microphone good enough? Is there too much disturbance? Whatever. I mean, that is a way in which the sun in Leo could work for Geminis. Well, if you're me, but regardless of what's going on in my life, the sun when the sun moves into Leo, there is some emphasis on not just communication, but how you are relating to the world around you. For example, your neighbours and your community. And I think that with the sun moving through Leo, this can be a time of year when you can get on reasonably well with your neighbours. And I know that neighbours can be an issue. You might be having a war with your neighbours, or perhaps you ignore your neighbours, but neighbours are there. Unless you're sort of living in the middle of nowhere, they kind of can't be avoided. And neighbours are not just the people who live next to you. There are people you come across every day. You may be going for a walk and you just see the same person every day, and it's the way it is. Or if you're going into work, there's always the same person, same people you see. Maybe you don't ever talk to them. So with the sun moving into Leo at a time when Jupiter is moving into Leo, I think it is important that you open your eyes and you look at your environment. What do they call it? Is it situational awareness? Sometimes Geminis can be very focused on their own world, their own mental world, their thoughts and their ideas, and everything going on around you can just be part of the scenery, and sometimes you just don't fully address it. And now might be a time when you need to be aware, and need to be aware that other people have a perspective, even that other things have a perspective. I think it's like there was a scene in Nausea. Jean-Paul Sartre was a Gemini, and in his book Nausea, there's a part of the scene where he describes his relationship to a piece of wood, and I think, and this shock that this piece of wood is like an external entity, that it's beyond himself. At least that was my understanding of it when I was reading that book, many decades ago. And so there might be that shock of recognizing not just that a piece of wood has a being, but the people you meet every day, they have a being. It's easy for Geminis to just split them off and to say, well, they're just part of the scenery. They don't really have a real individuality of their own, and to actually realize that something has an individuality. It needn't be a person. It can be an animal. It can be a plant. And just having that sense can be shocking. At least it seemed to be shocking to Jean-Paul Sartre when he was describing it in Nausea. So just be aware of other people's perspective with the sun in Leo and the sun making a conjunction to Jupiter, and be prepared also to talk it through, and conversation, real conversation. Geminis can sometimes just not be fully engaged. They can have a conversation, but really they're focusing on what they're talking about. They're not necessarily focusing on what the other person is saying. But you've got to try and be real about it. Listen to what someone is saying, even if it's just, hello, how are you, goodbye. Just listen to what someone is saying. Look at the body language. try to sort of read between the lines and try to recognize that you're dealing with a real person. And yeah, same goes for an animal, a dog. It's got a perspective, and maybe it's time to recognize that perspective. And while all this is going on, it is possible that you feel slightly unsure of yourself today, and maybe this is because the sun is not really in Leo necessarily, because it's changing sign. The sun moves into Leo at a particular time, like 13 minutes past 8 London time, or 13 minutes past 3 New York time, and so there could be a bit of uncertainty here, and you shouldn't necessarily trust your feelings and your impressions. You are getting impressions, you are having ideas about the way things are working out, but you're not fully sure of yourself, and that's okay. Sometimes it's good not to be sure of yourself, and it would be it's better to just suspend judgment until the situation has cleared. And I think the situation should clear in a day or two's time. One other thing to point out is that Mercury is making a semi-sextile to Mars. So Mercury is, of course, your ruler. It's in Cancer. Mars is in Gemini, and Mercury, okay, it is in Cancer, and I said at the beginning of this piece that maybe you're getting a bit bored of the sun in Cancer, and there'll be a relief when the sun moves into Leo. But Mercury is still there. Mercury is going to be in Cancer for a bit longer. In fact, Mercury is still retrograde, and Mercury making this semi-sextile to Mars could be annoying. Because with Mars in Gemini, this represents what you want to do, what you would like to do. It represents how you would like to assert yourself. And if it's semi-sextile Mars, it seems that there's just something you have to consider, something you don't want to consider, but perhaps you should. And Mercury in Cancer, that might be about something of a material nature, something financial. Maybe there's a bill that you have to pay, you don't want to pay. You're going to have to pay it anyway, but you're kind of delaying it. It's a kind of a strange psychology. You don't want that money to leave your bank account. If you've got any money in your bank account, you don't want to leave it. But it's going to have to leave anyway. So you just postpone paying that bill for as long as possible. But maybe Mercury semi-sextile Mars is just saying, well, this is the time. You've got to face it. Or it needn't be a bill. It could just be something financial that you kind of address. It could be something that you need to buy and you don't want to buy it. Something you really need to buy, not some sort of trivial item that might be nice to have. But sometimes Geminis can be quite concerned about money. I've heard it said that Geminis are mean with money. I've heard it said that. Of course, I've got my son in Gemini. I'm not saying there's anything in the textbooks which were to indicate that, but there just might be an unwillingness to part with money with that Mercury sextile, with that Mercury semi-sextile Mars, even though it's a done deal. You've agreed to it. Something you need to buy, money you owe, a bill that needs to be paid. So once you face that financial reality, I think that probably you're going to feel a lot better. Cancer. The sun has been moving through your sign for some time, a month, and it's getting ready to leave. But that is not the end of the Cancer season, because Mercury is still very much in Cancer. It's in the middle of the sign. Well, okay, not quite. Yeah, pretty much in the middle. I make it at 16 degrees 24 Cancer retrograde. So Mercury will go direct very soon, in a few days' time, and at the beginning of next month it will leave Cancer. But for the moment, the sign Cancer is represented. But with the Sun moving out of Cancer, there's perhaps a little bit less focus on you, and there may be other things that need to be considered. And with the Sun moving into Leo, this could say something about money. You've already got Jupiter in Leo, and Jupiter as a planet that does have a relationship to Cancer, because Jupiter's exalted in Cancer. And Jupiter has only just started its movement through Cancer, and it's a time where financially I think there are going to be opportunities over the next year, because Jupiter will be in Cancer for the next year. And so I think that there will be financial opportunities coming up, but maybe right now you're not aware of them. You haven't seen the possibilities. And it could be the case that as the Sun moves into Cancer, you start to see what is possible. And right now, where is the opportunity? But that sign change could mean that you start to see where the opportunity lies. Now, another way in which the Sun moving into Cancer could manifest is that perhaps over the last month you've had ideas. There are things you want to do, and when the Sun moves into Leo, the broad question changes. It's not what you want to do. You know what you want to do. The question is more, how are you going to do it? What do you need to get together? Now, it might be the case that you have to spend money in order to achieve some of your aims, or it might be that you have to just in general get things together. Maybe you don't have to spend money. Maybe the easy option is to spend money, but there are other ways of gathering your resources together, working out what is exactly needed. But you will be able to handle it. I mean, the Sun in Leo, it's in its own sign. So I think that you will have a really sort of good sense of what does need to be done. But that aside, we have the Moon continuing to move through Scorpio. I was looking at the comments to my last video, and I was talking about Cancer in that last video, and I was suggesting to Cancerians that the Moon in Scorpio rather, is not such a bad thing if you're a Cancerian, because the Moon in Scorpio is in a water sign, and it has Scorpio and Cancer are signs which are sympathetic to one another, and I was kind of indicating that Scorpio is a sign that Cancerians are quite comfortable with. Nonetheless, I think that there were some comments coming, I think, from a Cancerian perspective, that maybe Moon in Scorpio is a problem. Okay, I see the argument. The moon rules Cancer, and the Moon is in Scorpio. The Moon is fallen in Scorpio. Therefore, Moon in Scorpio may be difficult for some Cancerians. I certainly get that argument, but right now, the Moon in Scorpio is making favourable aspects. It's making a sextile to Venus, and it's making a trine to Mercury. And of course, Mercury is moving through Cancer. It's moving through your sign. And so I think that the Moon making those two aspects looks pretty good for you. I think it's a time, Cancer, when you can largely do what you want, in your own way. I don't think you're going to be doing anything dangerous or dramatic. I think that you can gently explore who you are and what you feel happy about. And I think additionally, you're able to talk about it. Yes, you can discuss what's on your mind, and you can perhaps advocate for your own interests, even though Mercury is retrograde. And I'm just thinking that we shouldn't exaggerate the impact of Mercury retrograde. Mercury is in its own decanate. I mean, that central decanate of Cancer is ruled by Mercury. Okay, it does depend which system of decanates you use. There are loads of systems of decanates, but I think the decanate system most used in Western astrology does indicate that Mercury rules that central decanate. So that certainly gives you some strength. And with the moon trine Mercury, I think Cancer, you should have no difficulty explaining yourself. And I think that you can be quite persuasive. And also we have the moon sextile Venus. So moon sextile Venus, I think Cancer just gives you a good ability to communicate. You can say what's on your mind. You can discuss your concerns. And additionally, I think that you can be really, very creative, very artistic. As I like to tell Cancerians, it is a very imaginative sign. And you can see things in many different ways, and you just get ideas, and you can pick things up from the cosmos and the vibes and whatever is swirling around you, and you understand what is important at a particular time, and you have the imagination to turn it into something very, very sort of interesting, and perhaps which has a certain artistic quality. So Cancer, if you have the opportunity, create something and use your ingenuity and your imagination, because I think right now you can do something rather special. Leo, the sun is of course getting ready to move into your sign, and in fact today at I think 13 minutes past 8, the sun indeed moves into Leo. There it is. I mean, that is that's a precise moment. In fact, that is set for New York. So that's or for Washington DC. So this is the precise moment that the sun moves into Leo. So that's today, 3:13 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is 8:13 p.m. London time, or 9:13 p.m. In most of continental Western Europe. So, Leo, this is your time. This is when the sun moves into your sign, when the sun has really a huge amount of strength. All things being equal, the best sign for the sun to be in is Leo. Now, from a sun sign perspective, I know you might be looking at this from a viewpoint of your ascendant, but from a sun sign perspective, you really can say that Leo is the best sign. I know some people felt like to think, all signs are equal, but no, the sun rules Leo. Therefore, logically, the sun is the best sign for the Leo to be in, and the second best sign for Leo to be in is Aries, because the sun is exalted in Aries. And so this is a time when you can really, really, make things happen. When you can, be yourself, especially as Jupiter is in Leo. So you had Jupiter moving into your sign quite recently. I mean, very recently, and I hope you're enjoying it. But the sun moving into Leo just kind of really emphasizes this. I mean, I know that the sun is now applying to a conjunction of Jupiter, and I will be talking about this Sun conjunct Jupiter in a few days' time. And you could argue that Jupiter is perhaps weakened by its proximity to the Sun, but I don't think we need to worry about that right now. The point is, this movement of the Sun in Leo is special, and it allows you to really be yourself. You don't have to be shy, and it's also it's your time of year. And so, it's important that you absolutely make the most of it. I know that in the Northern Hemisphere, certainly, it's kind of a holiday season. People go away, and late July and August can just be written off. But I wouldn't necessarily recommend that course of action. You don't want to just stop. There are definitely things you can achieve. It's a time to be, really presenting yourself. You want to be out there. You want to be making things happen, and I think you want to be, in the centre of things. And as far as today and perhaps tomorrow are concerned, you have an opportunity to really take action even before the Sun moves into Leo. Even if the Sun is in the last degree or few arc minutes of Cancer, even before that sign change, I think, Leo, you're in a situation where you really can have a real impact. And if you don't like the way things are going, you maybe want to make some changes or assert yourself, then I think you can. And Leo, you do have a vision about the way things should be. I think it's actually quite a clear vision, and you might to begin with feel a bit ignored. You feel that no one cares, but that's because you're not trying. And if you really tell everyone what you think, then I think that they're going to listen. You may not have to say anything. It may be about your actions. You act quickly and decisively, but with a good spirit. It's not like aggressive action. It's just you being yourself and just following your inner spirit. And if it is somewhat unexpected, well, maybe that gives you an advantage. It might be that certain people have temporarily forgotten about you. They discounted you. They weren't aware of you. They thought you'd gone somewhere else. But suddenly you make your presence felt, and it just comes from nowhere. And if you can do that in that moment of surprise, you really can seize the advantage. Virgo. Mercury is still, of course, in Cancer, and in Cancer, it's right in the middle of Cancer now, going retrograde, of course, about to go stationary direct. So that's going to happen really soon. Just a couple of days to wait, Virgo. So if you're feeling just frustrated that you can't get things together, there have been delays and so on, it's important that you don't panic and you don't give up, because relief is definitely on its way. And as far as today is concerned, the moon is moving through Scorpio, starting to move into sort of late Scorpio. It's because the Via Combusta border is 15 degrees Scorpio. So when the moon crosses 15 Scorpio, that means it is out of the Via Combusta. And when the moon is out of the Via Combusta, I think that you should find that things start to become easier, because having a Via Combusta at the same time as Mercury going retrograde just might mean that for some Virgos things just seem a little bit chaotic and uncertain. And when the moon hits that point, which would be London time, that would be this evening, this afternoon. If you're in the Americas, when the moon moves out of a Via Combusta, and the first thing that the moon does when it moves out of a Via Combusta is makes a trine to Mercury. It makes a trine to your ruling planet. So if you feel that today is not really going anywhere, at least that's your first impressions, or you find that there are just things going on that you don't understand, then it is important that you're able to see it through. Because I think that once the moon moves out of a Via Combusta, makes that trine to Mercury, I think things are going to feel better, and I think that your ability to get on with people is going to improve, and you might also find that certain people are more sympathetic and reasonable. I'm not thinking particularly of one-to-one partnerships. I'm thinking more of sort of people in general, people out there, maybe friends, people in society. It's just going to in general feel better. And over the day, Virgo, it is important to have a sense of confidence, that you actually know what you're talking about. Because I think you do know what you're talking about. You have thought it through. I think much more than other people have. And maybe this whole process of Mercury going retrograde has helped you think it through. You've perhaps been able to go over things again and again, and maybe even think about them. And so when it comes to issues of authority, I think, Virgo, you are actually in a powerful position. So if you want to tell people what to do, and you've got a good reason to tell people what to do, then go ahead. So it's not about just being a megalomaniac. It's about a situation cropping up, perhaps where there are particular views. You have your view, other people have their views, but it is likely that your view is going to be the correct view. And if you are correct, even though Mercury is retrograde, then perhaps you have an obligation to be insistent. You have to insist that people listen. And if you are insistent, I think that you will be taken seriously. And this could give you a position of authority and leadership. Even if you don't regard yourself as being a leader, you can put yourself in the center of things, and you just remember you've got something important to say. And if there's an argument, Virgo, then I really do think there's a good chance that you are going to be right. And we do have the Sun moving into Leo. And when we're talking about the Sun moving into Leo, there is this question about whether it means anything. Michel Gauguin, in his researches, he looked at statistical evidence for the various planets, and he didn't find any statistical evidence that the Sun worked. So the Sun was not part of the Gauguin system. So maybe the Sun moving into Leo doesn't mean anything. I think it does mean something, but from a Virgo view, I mean, what does that mean? I think the Sun moving into Leo kind of tells you that the Sun is soon enough going to move into Virgo. So you're in that last month before the Virgo season starts. And of course, if you're looking at this from a perspective of the Sun sign, it means that your birthday is going to be relatively soon. Or if it's your ascendant, then the Sun, when the Sun goes into Virgo, that is quite a powerful time for you, when you can really really be yourself. But the sun moving into Leo is perhaps a time when you can reflect. You don't necessarily have to do anything or commit to anything, but you can certainly think things through and perhaps look at things from a distance, especially as Jupiter is in Leo as well. So you can gain insights just by watching and not announcing yourself, and there is certainly some value in keeping a low profile and even being quite secretive. Libra, you definitely have a power to you. I mean, I think I talked about this yesterday, and you might sort of underestimate your own power, but Libra, if you want something to happen, if you really feel that it's a time to make an impact, I really think you can make it happen. And the less warning you give, the better. It's possible, Libra, that certain people are taking you for granted or haven't really understood you. They've made assumptions about you, and with the current situation, you have a chance to really be surprising, and you're able to act very quickly and decisively, and so don't put yourself in a situation where you feel that you are not in control. I mean, perhaps it's about attitude. And so if you think you're not in control, then that might be a self-fulfilling prophecy. But there's always a moment when things can turn around. So there may be moments when you're not doing anything, when you're being ignored, when you're sidelined, and then suddenly you just move into the center of things because something has changed, and you have changed, the situation has changed, and you see the opportunity. So Libra, it's important you don't hesitate, when the moment arrives. And it could be that if you miss that moment, you might not have another chance. At least in the very short term. So just be aware of what is going on, and we do have the sun getting ready to move into Leo. And Jupiter's already in Leo, and so I don't know. We've had the Sun in Cancer for the last month, and of course Mercury is still in Cancer. And all things being equal, I would have hoped that while the Sun was in Cancer, you were able to get things together. You were able to project yourself. I'm hoping that there might have been some progress in terms of how you were to have achieved some of your main goals. But when the Sun moves into Leo, there is a change of emphasis, especially as Jupiter is in Leo as well. It's not so much the short-term goals that matter, but perhaps it's the longer-term goals. It's what you want to achieve in the more distant future, how you want to align yourself, and you're thinking also about who you are and what is important to you. There may also be concepts of right and wrong, and making sure that as far as is possible, the world you are creating for yourself is in accord with who you are. And while we're at it, we've got a trine between the Moon and Mercury, and sextile between the Moon and Venus. Now, that trine between the Moon and Mercury, it's a fortunate aspect. And I just mentioned that I was hoping that you've been able to sort of get yourself together recently over the last month, that you've perhaps been able to achieve some of your aims. But it's not a question of anything being too late, really. Mercury is still in Cancer. Mercury is still in this very high-profile section of your chart. Mercury is also about to go direct, and the moon is making a trine to Mercury. So you might have a chance, Libra, to do something of real value. You thought it was going to be difficult, but in fact, it could actually be very easy. And you might have imagined that there were going to be, all kinds of complications. Perhaps there were complications in the past, but maybe if you put your effort into something today, which the last time you tried it was difficult and it just didn't work out, maybe you tried it on more than one occasion, but you try again and suddenly it does start to work and the complications start to ease. And with this moon trine Mercury, you find that you really are able to really get your message across. And the moon is not just trining Mercury, it's also making a sextile to Venus. So the moon makes sextile to Venus, which is your ruler, and so that moon sextile Venus, you kind of get the feeling that you have a chance to sort of move out of the shadows. You perhaps had been discounted, but you start to see a way in which you can have an influence. And I've already said that if you want to have an influence, you can. If you want to act quickly and unexpectedly, yes, you can. And then the moon trines Mercury, and you're able to really take advantage of the situation and be able to gain from it. And if, for example, you want to advocate for your own financial interests, then with moon trine Mercury, I think you can. And the things you say and the things you explain will, Libra, make a lot of sense. Scorpio. Sun is getting ready to move into Leo. And, I think that this is important. Okay, I know Sun goes into Leo every year. And, being an astrologer and trying to go through the 12 signs, maybe it sounds like, I say the same thing every year. If you can, perhaps if you go back to what I was saying a year ago, I'd rather you didn't, but if you did, and you find out what I was saying on, I don't know, July the 22nd, or 20th, whenever the Sun went into Leo in 2025, I'd probably be saying something about your ambitions and career, and this is a time, Scorpio, for you to get yourself together and to focus on what's important to you, and so on. But this is rather different because, last year Jupiter was in Cancer. This year Jupiter is in Leo. So the Sun is moving into the same sign as Jupiter. So in terms of your ambitions, what you are trying to achieve, perhaps your work and your career, Jupiter is already placed in a very important sector of your chart, often relating to career. So when the Sun comes in, the Sun is just acting as a trigger, you could say. And when the Sun moves into Leo, it starts moving towards a conjunction to Jupiter. And so this might really be a time when you need to think about what you are trying to achieve. And I know that it's a holiday season, certainly in the northern hemisphere, so you might be tempted to just put your feet up, go somewhere sunny, wherever. Although actually some Scorpios don't actually like the Sun. A lot of Scorpios regard the Sun as being quite destructive, and they prefer to stay in the shadows, to stay in the shade, which sounds to me to be pretty sensible. But there are things to do, and you don't want to get too caught up on sort of recreational activities, because that might be a waste. And don't forget that Jupiter in Leo has been making this opposition to Pluto, still making that opposition to Pluto, and one way of looking at Jupiter opposition Pluto is to see it in terms of ambition, really wanting to make things happen, not being satisfied with second best. And so with the Sun moving into Leo, starting to make an opposition to Pluto, this is a time to really think about what is important to you. You've had plenty of opportunity to think about things, to have different ideas, to speculate, but there comes a time when you perhaps have to make a decision, and you have to decide what is important and what needs to be done in the short term. And perhaps this time is arriving. And as the Sun moves into Leo, we do have the Moon in Scorpio. And so Moon in Scorpio, Moon in your sign, the Moon moving into the last half of Scorpio, because of course in the first half of Scorpio the Moon is in the Via Combusta, but the last half, it's just easier, that last half of Scorpio. And the Moon is making a trine to Mercury, and so with that trine to Mercury, Scorpio, I think that you have a good understanding of what is important. I think Moon trine Mercury, you're actually going to be very good at saying what's on your mind, and you can speak with real power and intensity, but also a certain amount of vision. So if you have a vision which might seem rather vague, and you might be concerned that other people just won't understand, well, see what happens. See what happens if you try to explain, and your explanations might actually make a lot of sense. So if you want to be persuasive, or at least try to be persuasive, well, give it a go, because I think that this is a time, Scorpio, when people are going to take notice of you. And in terms of relationships, we do have a sextile between the Moon and Venus. So Moon Venus sextile does mean that you know what to say. I think that you kind of know what the other person is thinking and feeling, and if you want to be sensitive and show your understanding of another person's viewpoint, show that you care, then Scorpio, that is certainly something that you're able to do. Now, we also have a rather interesting aspect between Mars and Neptune. So Mars is your ruler, of course, and it's making a 72-degree aspect to Neptune. So that means that it's making a quintile to Neptune. Quintile, 1/5 of the circle. And this quintile is about the impression that you want to give. And while it's true, Scorpio, that you're certainly able to talk, you can talk about most things if you want to, I don't think you're going to want to reveal too much, because Mars quintile Neptune is about sort of managing impressions. What kind of impression do you want to give? I mean, Neptune is about what kind of imagery you present. I mean, I know that Neptune is a bit vague, but it's also rather cloudy, and it can perhaps be related to disguises, and not just impressions but false impressions. And it may be that with this Mars quintile Neptune, you kind of want to change who you are. I mean, superficially. I mean, for real, Scorpio deep down doesn't change, and it might be that you want to perhaps lead other people astray. You want them to think that you're one person when you're actually someone else. And so in terms of creating impressions, that may say something about what you say, what you wear, where you go to, and not revealing things about yourself, or perhaps deciding what exactly you want to reveal, and it's in the process creating a distraction. And so it's possible that you can really change your image, but you're doing it for a reason. This is a quintile. Quintile is a very deliberate aspect, and you have your own reasons. Scorpios always have their own reasons. Willpower is something that is very important to the average Scorpio. So you decide that it's important for you to create a particular impression, and you're able to do it, and it can be successful. So I don't know why you might want to create an impression. You may be trying to impress someone, you may be trying to get a job, you may be trying to get a contract, or you may just be trying to get someone's attention. Sagittarius. Right now, Sagittarius, your ruler Jupiter is still opposition Pluto. This Jupiter-Pluto opposition, it's lasted a few days, but I just have to remind you that it's still around. And so with Jupiter opposition Pluto, it's still a time to be really pushing yourself. If there's something that you are trying to achieve, something you want to be successful at, then it's important that you really are able to keep going. You've hopefully had some success, but right now it just might be that you really want to be able to see it through to a successful conclusion, and you really want to do a good job. That does matter. Though, as I was also saying, Jupiter is square the Uranus-Neptune midpoint. Uranus is still square the Uranus-Neptune midpoint. So there continues to be this sort of spiritual undercurrent going on, and it might be about your perceptions, how you're thinking about the universe at large, the wider cosmos, and there is a great deal that you can pick up on. You understand what is going on in an almost unconscious way. Now, it might be the case that we're dealing with two separate phenomena. You've got on one hand you wanting to really be as successful as possible, really pushing yourself. On another hand, you're aware of the spiritual side of things and all that kind of stuff. But maybe you're bringing them together. Maybe you're just aware of something around you, and it's really important that you're able to bring it all together and ground it. So you as a Sagittarius, you are intuitive, you know what matters, and you're perhaps more intuitive than usual because you're just aware of everything. Perhaps you're plugged into the collective unconscious, the waking state, the dream state. There's this sort of a continuum there, and you just have an idea about what needs to be done, and this might actually fuel your ambition. Don't forget about this Jupiter-Pluto opposition, because it really does matter. And as far as today is concerned, the specifics of today, we do have the Sun moving into Leo, and the Sun in Leo, from your perspective, the Sun in Leo is great, because the Sun is moving into a fire sign. When the Sun was in Cancer, that wasn't incredible. I mean, Cancer, it's a water sign. Cancer and Sagittarius don't have a lot to do with each other. They're quite different signs. But, Leo, it's a fire sign. It's a sign that, is connected with things, beyond yourself, which you don't necessarily understand, but you want to strive to. And you may be looking to sort of just in general expand your field of operations. But when the sun moves into Leo, it straight away makes a conjunction to Jupiter. And this Sun-Jupiter conjunction, we do need to consider it, because it could be argued that the sun moving into Leo makes your ruler Jupiter combust. And so if you're talking about combustion, it might be, Sagittarius, that you just become aware of something new, something different, something interesting. Maybe it's an idea, a philosophy, a way of being, and it could attract a lot of your time. But it could be a red herring. It could be something that fundamentally is just a distraction. It's easy to get caught up on an idea. People don't get pamphlets anymore. It's all online, but you have a pamphlet, someone pushing their particular philosophy, their particular political or religious view, and it seems appealing at the time. But is it really relevant to you? So if you get suddenly caught up on a new idea over the next few days, don't necessarily take it too seriously, at least to begin with. Really work out what it's about. It's certainly not a good time to be, joining a church, joining a political party. I know in America people talk about, it's very important which church do you belong to. I don't think you kind of get that in the UK so much. It's not so formal, but it does seem to matter here. I know people are not as religious or as Christian as they used to be, but it's still a thing. And so it's not a good idea to be joining anything, particularly if there's a religious or an ideological side to it. Wait until that Sun-Jupiter conjunction is over, and just don't get excited by anything new. At least don't get excited to the point of making a commitment. I think it's good to get excited. No harm in that with Sun moving into Leo, but just keep your options open, and as far as is possible, try to be skeptical. I mean, Sagittarians are quite capable of being skeptical. There's no harm in laughing at something. It might be valid, but just look at the funny side. Look at the way in which something might be ridiculous. Maybe just be ever so slightly irreverent, but not to the point of being disrespectful. So just be aware of how the Sun and Jupiter coming together for you could be something confusing, and I think that you might get a first feel of it today, or certainly tomorrow, once the Sun moves into Leo. Although in general, I think that the Sun moving into Leo is definitely a good thing, and I think that it's going to help you to just see things in a different way, and to just get a different view. But what you don't want to do is just commit yourself to one view, because if you commit yourself to one view, you could end up limiting yourself, and that is the last thing you want to do. Capricorn, today there might be something that you feel that you should be doing, and it might feel that there is a certain urgency. If you don't do it now, then maybe there won't be another chance. But I think it's important not to feel that the solution is always action. That if you feel urgency, then that might actually be a mistaken impression. And if you were to act without thinking, then I think there might be cause for regret. Now, normally one doesn't associate Capricorn with unthinking action. You're slow, you're considered, you work out the possibilities, and if in doubt you don't do it. But there just could be today just some temptation to do something without warning, which kind of goes against your own better nature. So just be aware of that. Now, that doesn't mean that there is nothing to be done. I think that the best way of dealing with the astrological energies and the fact that the sun is now moving into Leo is to take a slower and more considered approach and perhaps be true to form. And when I say true to form, having some patience, realizing that there's always time. That if you want to do something well, it could take a long time, and it's got to be properly prepared. At every step of the way. So in terms of what you are doing, then I think that you have to think about perhaps what could go wrong. Nothing wrong with that at all. Just having a sensible approach and sort of modeling things in your mind. So if you're going to do something, or if you're going to start something, just thinking about how the whole thing could develop over time, and being ready to do some research, ask questions, go under the surface, and this is all in keeping with the fact that Jupiter is in Leo. Jupiter's been in Leo for a bit of time, but the Sun is joining Jupiter in Leo, and Leo in the Capricorn chart is actually quite an intense sign. I mean, don't forget Leo is fixed, and it's a fixed sign, and that means making the decision to really stay with it. Once you make a commitment, you hold on to that commitment, and you're able to really just keep going and keep exploring, keep understanding, and then at some stage it starts to make sense. But if you were to just do something random, without thinking, believe that you can sort a problem out in seconds, then I think that you could actually be making matters worse for yourself. So that is one way of looking at today. But I don't think it need be a bad day. Far from it. I mean, the moon is moving out of the Via Combusta. So, the Via Combusta ends at 15 degrees Scorpio. This afternoon in the Americas, this evening in Europe, the moon will move beyond the 15 degrees Scorpio point. And I think that things should start to stabilize, and that there'll perhaps be less cause or less apparent cause for doing something sort of crazy and unannounced, and instead you'll be able to be more constructive. And it's possible with the moon making a sextile to Venus and a trine to Mercury, that it's something that might be connected with someone else. If there's someone you need to talk to, something that needs to be discussed, then I think that moon trine Mercury might be the opportunity to really sort of get things together. And perhaps if you've been putting off a conversation because you just hadn't been sure where it was going to go, then today with that moon trine Uranus and the moon sextile Venus, might be the chance to resolve something. But it's got to be done in a way that is really sort of quite calm and resisting the temptation to be dramatic. Just allow things to work themselves out, in their own way. And if things aren't resolved today, well, it's okay. They might be resolved tomorrow. And there's certainly no need to panic. No need to think that today you need to find instant solutions. Aquarius. Moon is still in Scorpio. And if you remember from yesterday's reading, I was quite optimistic about the moon in Scorpio. I think that from an Aquarian view, the moon in Scorpio is it's a good place for the moon to be, especially during the last half of Scorpio. So during the first half of Scorpio, things might not have been always entirely stable. Things might have happened. There might have been sort of last-minute revisions. It was difficult to sort of get real clarity. But when the moon does move into the end of Scorpio, when it passes 15 degrees Scorpio, in other words, when it moves out of a via combusta, which would be this afternoon, I think, in the Americas, or this evening in Europe, of course. Perhaps tomorrow if you're in Australia or New Zealand. So that does create stability. So it might well be the case, Aquarius, that you're dealing with something that seems difficult, that seems almost uncontrollable, and you might think that it's best to just give up before things get even worse. But if you stay with it, I think that you will start to understand it and be able to work out what needs to be done. And the moon in Scorpio makes a trine to Mercury. It makes a sextile to Venus. But I think it's the moon trine Mercury which is especially important, because Aquarius, that does allow you to get things together and to really work out what needs to be done in a way that is but is slow and systematic. And there's certainly no need to do anything crazy, or to do something spur of the moment. I mean, it might be tempting. Perhaps something happens and you want to resolve it quickly. But if you were to do that, then it might not work out. Perhaps it's a situation where you might be sort of considering doing something dramatic on the basis of insufficient evidence. You see a couple of things, you think there's only one response, and you don't give yourself a time. You don't give yourself a time to consider other options. And I think right now there are other options which you need to sort of make yourself aware of, and you make yourself aware of it through just research, asking yourself questions, perhaps asking other people questions, and slowly you can really start to understand what is going on. And later today and into tomorrow, I think that you should find that things move pretty well. I mean, not necessarily quickly, but fast enough. And so you are making progress. It might not feel as if you're making progress, but it's definitely happening. Now, arguably, the main event of today is the sun moving into Leo. And, the sun is ruler of Leo. Leo is your opposite sign. And so sun moving into Leo might say something about relationships. You could argue that sun moving into Leo could be about someone becoming stronger. Perhaps a person in your life who perhaps recently had perhaps not been on particularly good form, or they might not even have been present or only half present, and you kind of wondered what they were doing. Maybe they seemed distracted, but with the sun moving into Leo, you find there is a change, and it's not a time to be underestimating anyone. You might have thought they didn't have much power. You might have thought even that you could tell them what to do, and it all seemed pretty straightforward. But when the sun moves into Leo, you perhaps realize you've got some competition. You're going to get some pushback. So do think about your social environment and the important people in your life, and have you made any recent assumptions about them? Because if you have made recent assumptions, then it may be that those assumptions were just a bit too hasty, and now you're perhaps seeing a different picture, or at least starting to see a different picture. And the sun in Leo might represent someone new arriving on the scene. So if you are alone and you're wondering who else is around, maybe someone else is about to show up for whatever reason. I mean, you could argue that sun moving into Leo could represent a new relationship. If it does represent a new relationship, it would be someone who is in their own way quite powerful, quite strong, because the sun is in its own sign. So be aware of that possibility. Also be aware that relationships have different purposes and different natures, and it just could be that you need some help from somewhere, and you're wondering where that help is going to come from. But perhaps when the sun moves into Leo, then your question is answered. But there could also be an ego issue here, because as I sometimes advocate, when we look at the 12 signs, that's how we categorize things. But maybe we shouldn't see things in terms of 12 signs. Maybe we should see it in terms of 6 polarities. And your polarity is Leo Aquarius, and Aquarius is you, and Leo is the side of yourself that you are least aware of. And if you think about what people often say about Aquarius is detached, doesn't like to show off, is perhaps somewhat retiring and sort of analytical even. And Leo represents the sort of the secret side to Aquarius, the side to Aquarius that maybe some Aquarians are in denial of. So if you think about Leo, you think about the ego, a strong sense of self, wanting appreciation, wanting praise. You might not be able to consciously identify with these concepts, but maybe you should. Maybe you do have a part of yourself that is looking for praise. You want people to tell you how wonderful you are. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And maybe with the sun moving into Leo, it all starts to become an issue. And it might start with a bit of resentment. You perhaps notice that someone else wants praise. Someone else is wanting attention, and you might get annoyed that someone else wants attention. But maybe the fundamental reason why you're watching this, why you believe that someone wants too much attention, is because deep down you want the attention. And if you feel that you need attention, well, maybe this is something you need to start to think about. Maybe you deserve attention. And if you're not getting enough attention, maybe it's just because you haven't been sufficiently open about what you've been doing. Perhaps you've been just too objective, and you've been sort of working on something, and you've tried to be independent. There is that contradiction there, perhaps in Aquarius, wanting to be independent, but secretly, deep down, wanting attention. And the two should kind of be brought together. Maybe you've got something to show the world, and if you were to show the world with what you're doing with openness and honesty, you might get the attention that I'm sure you deserve. Pisces. Moon is continuing to move through Scorpio, and Scorpio is a water sign, and it is a sign that is, I would have said, Pisces friendly. And so I think that you're quite happy for the moon to be in this placement, particularly the last half of Scorpio. When the moon moves out of the Via Combusta, remember the first half of Scorpio is in the Via Combusta, so when it moves into the last half, things do tend to get easier and more straightforward. And so you have an opportunity to move beyond things, sort of move beyond your sort of existing sort of ideas, and perhaps to experiment with something else, but in a way that isn't dangerous, that is actually perhaps quite enlightening, and is safe as well. And the moon in Scorpio does make a trine to Mercury, so the moon trine Mercury is one of those aspects that sort of creates a grand trine, because you've got moon in Scorpio, Mercury in Cancer, and the other water sign is called Scorpio. Mercury in Cancer, moon in Scorpio, and the other water sign is Pisces, which is of course your sign. So it kind of has a grand trine relationship with the moon and Mercury, and so this is an opportunity to really understand things on an emotional level. You're picking up on everything. You can really get it, and you can see what exactly is possible. And it might be that on a psychological level you can sort of flip into something else. You don't have to be constrained by the material world. You perhaps have access to sort of higher ways of thinking, and if you want to understand where everything is going, not just where the collective is going, where the universe is going, or where the universe wants everything to go, I think that you are in touch with that all, with it all. And so Pisces, there may be moments of realization where finally things start to become clear, and and there might be a feeling that you have to push things further. Jupiter is still making an opposition to Pluto, so you want things to be done well, and you want things to be just done as close as is possible to excellence. And this may say something about how you're trying to organize things. Your unconscious is telling you one thing. Your unconscious is telling you what is going on, and your conscious self is just trying to put it all in order. So as soon as you get new material, you want to incorporate it. And so it might be a period where you're involved in some project, at least a project in your mind, where you're trying to bring things down to earth and make sense of it all. And it's it's not necessarily easy, but you have what it takes, and you shouldn't be impatient. I mean, Jupiter is in Leo, but it's making an opposition to Pluto. But Jupiter, to get Jupiter is your ruler, and Jupiter will be in Leo for the next year. I think it changes sign into Virgo in July of next year. So there is work to be done, and indeed continued work to be done. And it's important that you are not disturbed and distracted. It's also important that you don't just do things for the sake of it, which perhaps you could, because now that the Sun is in Leo, it means that the Sun is moving towards a conjunction of Jupiter. In other words, Jupiter is combust, and the Sun is not always a fortunate planet. And so with the Sun moving closer to Jupiter, it just could be that something is overwhelming you, and that something might just be your obsession with perfection for the sake of it. And one doesn't normally associate Pisces with perfection, but maybe it's like what I was saying to Aquarius, because when I was talking to Aquarius, I was saying that maybe one should see signs as being about polarity, not just 12 signs, but maybe 6 pairs of signs. And so with you, Pisces, you've got these two. The pair of, Pisces is paired with Virgo. So maybe Pisces, you have got this inner Virgo to you, which actually does want things to be done properly. And, that is good. But on an unconscious level, that Virgo impulse can be kind of twisted, and it can become extreme and can almost become rather mindless. Why do you want things to be done properly? Well, just for the sake of it. And that could be how the Sun-Jupiter conjunction works. So, whatever you're doing, Pisces, ask yourself why. And if you can't come up with a reason, or if you feel that there's any sense of obsession happening, then maybe think again. And you want things to be good, but absolute perfection is possibly right now not something that you should be aiming for. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And now it's time to look at things from the perspective of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Wednesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 20, which is contemplation. This hexagram is shaped rather like a tower. And so, you might get the idea of sitting on top of a tower and just watching, giving yourself a good vantage point. It's not a time to be making any decision. Rather just watch. And in terms of the structure of this hexagram, the bottom trigram, all of the lines are broken. This trigram is about the receptive. It's not about taking the initiative. And the top trigram is the wind. So you kind of you allow the wind to flow, and the wind gives you an idea about what is going on. I mean, the wind is connected with air, and you just you kind of imagine yourself on this tower, the air sort of all around you. Maybe there's a breeze, maybe more than a breeze, but you're just getting an idea about what's going on, and you're certainly not ready to take action. And so that can come later. Now, this hexagram contemplation has 3 moving lines. Now, with 3 moving lines, even though it's quite a passive hexagram, it does indicate that over the course of a day there will be changes, and you move from one thing to another thing, and there may be even sort of 3 particular stages to the day. Now, the bottom line moves, and the bottom line talks about a child's perspective. And it's a child, well, it talks about a boy, but I mean, it's just a child. I think we can regard it like that. And the hexagram is quite sort of dismissive, or it gives a warning. It's kind of saying that you notice things, but you kind of notice things from a rather childish way. You just see things happening, but it doesn't mean anything. You don't understand what it's all about. So, sometimes from a philosophical point of view, the child's view is considered to be something praiseworthy. The sort of the naivety of a child, just not expecting too much because you don't have any experience to expect anything particular. But here, it's not been complimentary here. It just means that it's okay if you are a child to just watch and not make sense of it all. But if you're an adult, if you've got responsibility, you should be making sense of it all. When something is happening, don't just say, "Oh well, that's interesting. I've never seen that before." Ask yourself, what's it about? What does it mean? But there's just a good chance that you just don't see it. You just see something happening. You might note that it's happened, but you can't work it out. And the I Ching really suggests that is not good. And so if there is any advice here, certainly at the beginning of the day, don't be too objective about things. You're not there just to be a sort of a passive note taker. You're there to actually understand what something might mean and to really start to think about it. And the fourth line moves as well. The fourth line, it's not so bad. The fourth line, indicates that you've definitely got something to offer, and you've definitely got insights, and those insights can be of use to other people, to maybe the powers that be. And so if you realize something, then be open about it, because other people might be interested, and these insights come through careful observation, but not the observation of the child. You've made the connections, you've started to see how it's all going to work, and then the sixth line moves. And the top line, which the sixth line is the top line, is certainly about you really starting to understand things, really understand what it's all about. But part of you kind of wants to be detached at this stage. I mean, you've been through it all, you've seen it all, and you kind of want to step back from it. So there's a difference between the bottom line and the top line. The bottom line is about you seeing things, observing things, and it just doesn't make any sense. You're not even trying to make sense of it. The top line is watching things, seeing things. It all makes sense, finally. And once you know what's going on, you just perhaps want to move above things, and you don't necessarily want to have to participate in the real world, because maybe you've seen it all before, and you're starting to think, though, even however detached you might feel, that at some stage you are going to have to take action, because in a way the top line is the end of a process. It's the end of a process of contemplation, and having finished that process of contemplation, you're ready to start to take action, but that might come at a later stage. And it's kind of rather appropriate that this is happening when the sun is moving from Cancer to Leo. So perhaps you could say that the sun moving through late Cancer, this is a process of reflection. Cancer being a very reflective sign, you see how things are working out. But then Leo, fire sign, that might be the time for the big change. So I think that in a way this hexagram of contemplation does sort of reflect what is going on astrologically, but it's reflection. It's not that one approach is better than another. So this moves to a second hexagram, and the hexagram it moves to is hexagram number 17, which is following. And this really is a natural progression. So the previous hexagram 20 is quite passive. You observe, you get insights. You're not trying to initiate anything. But with this hexagram 17 following, it's all starting to make sense. You understand what's important, and you are in a position to perhaps attract a following because you've got something to offer, because you understand the way things are working, and leading and following, who's following who. I think perhaps to begin with, in a previous hexagram contemplation, it's perhaps you doing the following. You have followed events. You've seen how things have worked out. You haven't made any decisions. You haven't reached any conclusions. You have just watched. But now with following, it's starting to become clear. And as you become clearer about what needs to be done, that means that people increasingly are prepared to listen to you. And that's it. That's all I've got to say for today. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.